In the summer of 1776, while 13 colonies declared themselves free, the Overhill Cherokee tried to drive the settlers off their mountains in a single coordinated blow. The blow failed, and the person most responsible for blunting it was not a soldier, not a settler, but a Cherokee woman, acting from an office her people had given her, the power to speak in council and to decide the fate of captives. Her name was Nanyehi. The settlers would call her Nancy Ward. Nanyehi's War, Nancy Ward, and the 1776 Cherokee War. She was born around 1738 at Chota, the Overhill capital on the Little Tennessee River, the beloved town, the place of refuge, the political heart of a nation. Her name, Nanyehi, meant one who goes about. She was niece to the peace chief Atakulakula and first cousin to a young war leader named Dragging Canoe. The two men were the poles of the storm to come, and she stood between them. Her whole life would be lived on that seam. Her authority began in blood. Around 1755, at the Battle of Taliwa against the Creeks, she was at her first husband's side when he fell. By tradition, she took up his rifle and rallied the line to victory. The dramatic details survive through a single fragile chain, one trader's story, retold to a child, written down only 60 years later. But the result was solid. She became a war woman. Later, she married a trader, Bryant Ward, and that name, Nancy Ward, followed her into history.
She held the office of Beloved Woman, by virtue of which she was entitled to speak in councils and to decide the fate of captives.
This is the part too easily lost. She was not a symbol. She was an institution. As Ghigau, Beloved Woman, she headed the Women's Council, held a voting seat on the Council of Chiefs, and held final say over prisoners. A naturalist who heard of her decades later put it without hedging, her counsel was decisive even in affairs of life and death. Hold that phrase. Everything she did in 1776 flows directly from a power her people had already, formally, placed in her hands.
Her advice and counsel bordered on supreme, and her interference was allowed to be decisive even in affairs of life and death.
The war came, as these wars came, for land. In March 1775, at Sycamore Shoals, Richard Henderson's company bought some 20 million acres, most of Kentucky and Middle Tennessee, from the old chiefs for about 10,000 pounds in trade goods. Virginia and North Carolina both called the sale illegal, but settlers were already squatting on Cherokee ground along the Watauga and the Holston. The elders sold to slow the flood. One young man rose and refused to sign.
You have bought a fair land, but there is a cloud hanging over it. You will find its settlement dark and bloody.
That was Dragging Canoe, her cousin. In May 1776, a delegation of northern nations arrived at Chota carrying a war belt, urging the Cherokee to join a general rising against the settlers. British agents supplied the guns but counseled patience. The young men did not want patience. The nation split along the line of age, the elders for restraint, the warriors for war. Dragging Canoe took the belt. He planned 3 blows at once, against the Holston stations, against Carter's Valley, and against the forts on the Watauga.
As for me, I have my young warriors about me. We will have our lands.
Nanyehi knew the plan. And here, the legend and the record begin to wrestle, because how she warned the settlers is genuinely contested. The cleanest history names one man, a trader, Isaac Thomas, sent ahead to raise the alarm. A later, romantic tradition adds more couriers, names that cannot be found in any primary document. What is certain is the office behind it. She used her standing to release traitors before the war parties marched. By early July, the settlers were already fording up.
The warning came from Nancy Ward that 700 Cherokee warriors were advancing in 2 divisions against the Watauga and Holston settlements.
Forewarned, the settlers abandoned their farms and crowded behind palisades. The Nolichucky people left Fort Lee and packed into Fort Caswell at Sycamore Shoals. On the Holston, the militia gathered at Eaton Station. The surprise that Dragging Canoe needed was gone before he reached the valley. 2 of the 3 prongs would break on prepared men behind log walls. The 3rd would never strike at all. Damage against 1,000 miles of frontier, but not the route that would have followed surprise. On July 20th, about 170 frontiersmen met an equal Cherokee force on the open ground of Island Flats. The militia did not hide, they advanced. In a short, sharp fight, the Cherokee broke. Dragging Canoe himself was badly wounded, shot through both legs. The clearest receipt is a letter from Virginia's own president, written 11 days later, reporting the result in cold arithmetic.
They totally routed them, killing on the spot 13 without losing a man. We have certain intelligence that they were marching 600 men into our frontiers.
12 miles east, at dawn on July 21st, old Abraham of Chilhowee threw his warriors at Fort Watauga. Inside were perhaps 75 people, under Carter, Robertson, and a young John Sevier. The rush failed. It settled into a 2-week siege that could not crack the walls. The story that a woman, Kate Sherrill, was carried over the palisade by the man she would marry is tradition, not record. But a boy was taken at the wells, and a woman captured, and her capture set the stage for the act Nanyehi is remembered for.
We sent out a detachment of 13 men. They pursued very briskly, came up with the said Indian, killed and scalped him.
The woman was Lydia Bean. Taken back to the towns, she was condemned to die, bound to the stake, the fire ready. And then the beloved woman intervened. By the same authority that could send couriers, she could halt an execution. She ordered Bean cut down. It is the best documented exercise of the captive power in all her life. Not mercy borrowed, but mercy that was hers to give.
She was saved by her interposition. After having been condemned to death and already bound to the stake.
What follows is tradition, hardening into legend. The story goes that Lydia Bean repaid the rescue by teaching the Cherokee to keep dairy cattle and later to weave. The dairying may be true. The weaving was added a century on. But notice the sting. Dairying and weaving were exactly the so-called civilization skills that American agents would later press on the Cherokee to remake them and ease them off their land. Nanyehi is praised for adopting the very tools that would later be used to dispossess her people. Survival licensed revenge. In the fall of 1776, 3 columns of militia marched into Cherokee country from Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia, and burned more than 50 towns. Not battles, erasure. Crops fired in the field, granaries emptied, orchards cut, the winter's food turned to ash. The blow Dragging Canoe meant to deliver fell instead on his own nation. A people that had tried to defend its country was left starving in it. Broken, the Cherokee sued for peace, and in 1777 ceded vast tracts at 2 treaties, DeWitt's Corner and the Long Island of the Holston. Years later, at that same Long Island, Nanyehi rose to speak for peace and gave the words now carved on her memory. They belong to 1781, not 1777, a small correction worth making because the words are too important to misdate.
You know that women are always looked upon as nothing. But we are your mothers. You are our sons. Our cry is all for peace. Let it continue. This peace must last forever.
Her cousin would not say it. Dragging Canoe rejected every cession and walked away from the towns, taking some 500 followers southwest to the country near present-day Chattanooga. There he built a new resistance, the Chickamauga, and kept the war alive for 18 years, the longest sustained native fight in the Southeast. When envoys asked if the Cherokee were beaten, he held up the old war belts of 1776 and gave them their answer.
We are not yet conquered.
He died in 1792. His war ended 2 years later. And here is the bitter turn. The men who learned politics in his rebellion would go on to lead the whole Cherokee nation, and that line runs straight to the leaders of New Chota and the road west, to the Trail of Tears. Nanyehi lived to see the danger coming. In 1817, old and frail, she sent word to the council not to sell another acre, the same plea to the end.
Do not part with any more of our lands, but continue on it and enlarge your farms. It was our desire to forewarn you all, not to part with our lands.
So what can we actually know? 3 things hold. Her power was real and formal. The same office that spared Lydia Bean could have condemned her. The split was real and permanent. 1776 did not create the rift between accommodation and resistance, but it set it for good, and 2 cousins became its opposite faces. And the record is thin and late, written down decades on, half romance, partly lost to fire. The spine survives, the flourishes do not. And the one thing we most want, why she did it, is the one thing no document records. Patriotism, some have said, though the word fits poorly, or humanitarian duty, or cold pragmatism, sparing the settlers the worst before the reprisals fell, or simple kinship to the traders among them. No contemporary source gives her motive. Honest history leaves the question open and lets her keep it. She ran an inn by a river ford in her last years, the first Cherokee cattle owner, and died around 1822, before her people were driven west. The office of beloved woman faded with her, but the choice did not. That in the one summer when surprise might have won, she used the power her nation gave her to save lives on both sides, and spent the rest of it begging both sides to keep the land. A Cherokee, not a settler. The woman who blunted the blow. From Ember and Ash, lesser-known history.